Ladies and gentlemen, I think we'll go ahead and begin our session here. It's the last session of today. Thank you for your attendance. My name is Stephen Carter. I'm the treasurer of the ICPA, and my capacity here this afternoon is to introduce a panel, a very important discussion, and then to sit back and listen and learn. And I invite you to do the same thing. I will say that attending in the session this afternoon are members from the African delegation that were going to be in a workshop this afternoon. They are now meeting here. It's the group that's looking at prison reform and interventions in Africa. That group will now meet on Thursday, the 15th, from 11 o'clock in the morning until 3 in the afternoon, and that will be in the Enterprise room. So that's just by way of an announcement for a change that has occurred in the scheduling. We will mention that again at the end of the panel discussion this afternoon. There's one other general announcement that I need to make, and that is that if you happen to have picked up the wrong conference bag that had someone's spectacles in it, if you would let the registration desk know, because that person is wandering around walking into walls because they can't see. So if you happen to have collected the wrong bag, if you would see the people at the registration desk, we'll make sure it gets back in the right hands and on the right notes. This afternoon we have a very important discussion that relates to remand prisoners. And we've been talking about unlocking the second prison. Sometimes there is a prison within a prison, and that's often our remand population that are within the prison system. In many jurisdictions, as you well know, the remand population exceeds that of the sentenced prisoners' population, and oftentimes they wait extended periods of time before they are adjudicated and perhaps stay in prison or perhaps are released. So we think it's very, very important that we address some of the intervention techniques that are underway, and we will use a case study discussion this afternoon. Delighted to have three very qualified members from the Open Society, the Justice Initiative. I'm going to introduce Kerstin McCourt, who will start, and then she will tell you more about our other panelists, Robert and Elinor, who will come on and discuss specific aspects of it. I'm not going to take any more of their time. We hope that you will energetically participate in questions as we complete the presentations of the panel. So, Kerstin, I'll turn it to you there.
Thank you very much, and can you hear me? Is that okay? Yeah. So I'm really delighted to be here and to be presenting together with Robert and Elinor on the question of pretrial detention and how that's then linking into the theme of the conference impacts on the reintegration of prisoners. So I'm from the Open Society Justice Initiative. For those of you who don't know the organization, it's a part of the Open Society Foundations, which is a network of foundations around the world. And the Justice Initiative focuses specifically on access to justice programs and is an operational program within the Open Society. So we'd like to focus our attention during this presentation on two key areas. Starting off by looking at the criminal justice chain and the fact that the entry point to the criminal justice system is very often forgotten and left out. Yet if we don't get things right at the entry point to the system, then the problems will be magnified further down the chain. And the other part that we'd like to look at are the community partnerships. And again, these are crucial for links between the institutions and the communities, and for a variety of different services. And in essence, the system can't really work without these partnerships. So at the Open Society Justice Initiative, we've been working a lot over the last 2 to 3 years on a global campaign for pretrial justice, looking at these different issues. criminal justice chain and to exemplify that each section of the system is linked to each other. And we need to intervene at all the different stages, but we mustn't forget the entry point. And as all of you will know, I mean, we're speaking amongst an audience of immense experience and talent. But the decision to arrest somebody is a very draconian decision. It's made quite rapidly, which in many instances is of course necessary, but it has repercussions down the whole chain, and the results can be very severe and long-lasting. And unfortunately, in an ideal world, we would hope that only the right people would be arrested. But there are lots of drivers that are leading in many countries around the world to arbitrary arrests and leading them to arbitrary detention. And groups like the UN Working Group on Arbitrary Detention have done a lot of work in this area, classifying arbitrary detention and monitoring and looking into cases. And so these are just a list of some of the drivers that lead to such a situation. They might be related to poor facilities, poor investigatory techniques, political motives, discrimination, and an automatic feeling that it's necessary to put people into pretrial detention. We're not advocating that pretrial detention should be abolished. It's very necessary in certain circumstances, but it should be used as a last resort, and what we're seeing in many countries is that it's used as the automatic recourse. So coming back again to the chain, I just highlighted some of the impacts that we see along that chain. Obviously, if a large percentage of the prison population are in pretrial detention, that's having a huge impact on overcrowding, and Robert's going to talk more about that. At the trial stage, there have been studies done primarily in the US and the UK that when you take groups of people who have committed similar crimes and come from similar situations, those that are remanded in custody and those that are released pre-trial, those that were remanded in custody generally tend to get much higher sentences, much harsher sentences. They don't have somehow the advantage of those that were released pre-trial and can prove that they complied with the bail conditions, and therefore can possibly be seen in a more favourable light when it comes to sentencing. And again, when you look at release and reintegration, I mean, just from a very practical perspective, if you have a lot of the wrong people in detention in the first place, you're having to expend a lot of resources to reintegrate people that didn't need to be there to begin with. So the problems vary in different countries, but one of the reasons that we decided to focus our attentions on this issue is that it is a global problem. It's not limited to any one geographic region. I mean, some of the worst situations, I think the Liberia situation has improved a little bit since these figures. These figures are about the 2009 figures. They have 97% of the prison population in pretrial detention. Other countries, Mali, Haiti, DRC, India, are all above 70%. But it's not exclusive. I mean, in Italy, 58% are in pretrial detention. And this is an issue that the European Union is currently looking at, and there's a consultation open at the moment for member states in the European Union to give inputs and comments to the European Commission on detention conditions in general, but with a large focus on pretrial detention. But another factor that's also very important when we look at reintegration, when we look at the prison system as a whole, is a lot of these people are actually in detention for very minor crimes. And these figures are from a study that was done in Africa, so they're all from the region. And you can see in a lot of places, Ghana, 90% of the people are in detention for minor crimes. South Sudan 80%, Malawi 85%. So a lot of these people could far more productively be diverted out of the criminal justice system. And then, when we also look at who pretrial detention is affecting, it's generally affecting the poor and the marginalised, those that are least equipped to deal with the criminal justice system. And unfortunately, we see in a lot of places that if you have the power and the connections and the money to essentially bribe your way out of the system, then you can be out of the system. And if you're poor and you don't have those kinds of connections, then you end up in the system. And so it's often less to do with the crime that you've committed, but often to do with your kind of possibilities. And particularly in places where there's discrimination against certain groups, people are often discriminated against and kind of picked up by the police and arrested, and then they're discriminated again once they're in prison. So one of the things we've been looking at is what impact does this have on the criminal justice system, but also on the society as a whole. And we realise that these issues can't just be dealt with by lawyers and people working in correctional services. They have to be looked at amongst health professionals, amongst people engaged in social development. And so we've been doing a lot of work to look at the impact, both on the individuals, for example, their income and employment, that even being detained for a very short period of time, days, weeks or months, can have an impact on your future earning potentials. There are very few employers who might keep your job open for you for a couple of months. The health conditions, unfortunately, are very often worse in pretrial detention than they are for sentenced prisoners. And when we're looking at children and youth, again, a short time in detention means that they're going to drop out of a whole school year and generally fall back in terms of education. This was a report recently from earlier this year that was done by a journalist from the UK's independent newspaper, and he went to Denver Road Prison in Sierra Leone and interviewed a lot of the juveniles there. He found that a lot of people were like this person, this 16-year-old who had been in pretrial detention. He'd been living on the streets for 9 years and was in detention for basically handling stolen goods, for having a stolen radio. And the journalist found that of all of the 1,300 prisoners, that includes the adult prisoners as well, there were a variety of health problems, including chronic scabies. And then looking further at the impact on families and communities. Families suffer enormously when somebody is detained, particularly in developing countries. They're often expected to provide food to their detained family member, to bring blankets, to bring all kinds of goods. They often have to provide fuel and transport backwards and forwards between the prison and the court. So for people who are already living in quite a marginalised perspective, then expending this money can bring people further into poverty. Several people this morning have already mentioned the intergenerational effects of detention. The presentation looking at Wales this morning, the speaker said that out of 10 fathers in prison, 6 of their sons will end up in detention. So again, having people in pretrial detention and then increasing their chances of being detained long term has an intergenerational effect from one generation to the next. And in some communities, this can actually affect not just the family, but the whole community. We've been doing quite a lot of work in Malawi, and one of the cases that's been documented, and it's a typical case in many communities, is that when a male head of the household was arrested, his family had a maize milling machine that they used to gain income, and the family had to sell that maize milling machine to pay for legal fees, to pay bribes, to try and secure bail. And the machine had brought a steady income to the family, and that they used that income to buy seed, to hire labour, etc. And so when the machine was sold, it was sold to a community far away from that original community. And so not only did the family lose the income that they had, but the whole community then had to go back to pounding grain by hand, which obviously meant that that was taking up a more significant proportion of their day. So the impact of detaining one person can have an enormous ripple effect on the whole community. We've also been working a lot in Mexico, Argentina and Chile, and have done studies on the costs of detention in all of those countries. So a study in Mexico showed that the annual cost for an average detainee is about $11,000 US dollars. And a significant proportion of this was spent by the state, a certain amount by the detainee and the detainee's family, and also some by the community. And those calculations didn't even include the costs of construction of detention facilities. And so I think it's interesting to look at these costs and to then see how we can engage finance industries more effectively in criminal justice reform. This was possibly a slightly facile calculation in a way that we did. But we said that if you calculate all the days of the people who are in pretrial detention, then that equates to 500 million person days. And if you add that up, you could build 10 of the pyramids in Egypt with those number of labour days. And the picture is from Malawi. It's a few years ago now, from a picture that appeared in the New York Times of the prisons there. And again, this exemplifies a similar point, that the annual pretrial detention costs in Europe is about $18.3 billion, and that's approximately double, you can see on the graph, of what it costs to feed 100 million people for 1 year, or what the Global Fund spends in 1 year. It's about 4 times what the WHO spends over the period of a year, and way more than what the UN budget comprises. So, having kind of painted a slightly gloomy picture, but also a picture where we really need to be taking concerted efforts and working in partnerships to deal with the problem of pretrial detention. We're working closely with a number of organizations in Africa and Latin America, Central and Eastern Europe. And so I'm really delighted that we're co-presenting together with colleagues from Uganda. So I'm going to hand over to Robert Omita, who is the Assistant Commissioner for Welfare and Rehabilitation in the Ugandan Prison Service. And he's worked there for about 15 years and previously had a background in education. And so we've been working together. We presented at the ICPA conference in Ghent last year, and are very keen to kind of demonstrate how these kinds of partnerships
Thank you, Kerstin, and I feel greatly humbled to stand before you, eminent professionals and practitioners in the area of correction and the justice systems. Kerstin was able to pronounce the name so well, I shouldn't repeat the introduction. I work for the Uganda Prison Service, and I bring you greetings from Uganda. I want to look at the issue of pre-trial detention and try to bring it down to a smaller perspective, looking at the correctional services. And to note really is that correctional services are at the end of the criminal justice pipeline. And Kerstin has dwelt a lot on issues with the police and the other agencies. Pretrial decisions are really made upstream the justice system, and therefore sometimes correctional services find themselves in a very difficult situation. However, it is also important to note that the end result of the justice system is suffered at the criminal justice, at the correctional services level. When we look at the area, the issues concerning the remands, we find that actually remands eventually end up in the prison. And so the prisons have really to take great interest on the issues which happen upstream the criminal justice system. One time I had a hot debate with colleagues in the correctional services, and they were wondering whether the correctional services really have a hand in controlling the flow of accused persons to the prison. And their belief was, no, that is the work of the police, and it is the work of the courts. The prison is there to receive. And I think that is a notion that now needs to be challenged, because we believe in our experience that the correctional services have to pick great interest and to be proactive in the whole criminal justice processes. As we say, prisons cannot operate like lagoons, receiving and containing. I'll take you through some quick facts about Uganda. Uganda Prison Service. As we speak now, the service is engineering a paradigm shift from custody per se to corrections, and it is a very daunting task. The average population of prisoners in Uganda is currently at 32,000, and of these, 54% are pretrial detainees. This has been significantly reduced from 63% in 2005, and you will come to know about some of the reasons why there has been this tremendous reduction in the course of our presentation. And we have a staff capacity of 7,000 to look after these citizens. Now, I want to attempt to link pre-trial detention with corrections, and to see whether really pre-trial detention has an effect on the processes of social rehabilitation and reintegration of offenders. As Kerstin already said, pre-trial detention is perhaps very necessary. It's one of the necessary activities in the process of criminal justice. However, the challenge is with the overuse of pre-trial detention. And we observe that pre-trial detention impacts on the correctional services in three main ways. First of all, the direct costs, such as on operations and administration of the correctional services. And then we also have the indirect costs, such as through overcrowding, unsanitary conditions, and so on. And then thirdly, indirect effects on rehabilitation and reintegration of offenders. Looking at the direct costs, ladies and gentlemen, it's important to note that the cost of administration of a prison is indeed high. Government has to hire guards, or warders for that matter, and operations have to run. If the numbers are high, then government definitely has to recruit a big number of staff. to be able to contain and then to rehabilitate. As I speak now, the staff to inmate ratio in Uganda is 1 to 5, well below the recommended international standard of 1 to 3. However, when you look critically at the figures of 54% being on remand, you will note that if the remand population was drastically reduced, then we would well achieve the ratio of 1 to 3. For example, instead of 32,000, if we had 21,000 inmates, then we wouldn't need to recruit more staff because we would achieve the ratio of 1 to 3. And 21,000 is already beyond the number of convicted prisoners because we have 14,500 convicts. With regard to ward space, there is a direct effect on the holding capacity. And as of our latest figures, we have a congestion level of 200%. In other words, we are full beyond capacity. We have on average 2 inmates per 3.6 square meters, which is the recommended standard. And of course, it will be better to have 1, as the ideal would require. Again, if you look at the statistics and the remand population, this wouldn't be a problem if the pretrial population was smaller. It's needless to mention the cost of feeding, the cost of clothing, bedding, health care is great, and this directly impacts on the resources which must go to social rehabilitation and integration. In situations of difficulty, the first target is on the basic necessities. And so you can imagine that if the basics of food, health care, and bedding is handled first, then probably there is very little left for social rehabilitation and reintegration. But pretrial detention also has indirect costs, and it is notable to focus on overcrowding. Overcrowding is a challenge to most correctional jurisdictions, Uganda inclusive, and we have come to establish that pretrial detention, and particularly the overuse, is a big contributor to overcrowding. Overcrowding also has its own problems, like causing sanitation problems, unhygienic and sanitary conditions, of course a constant lack of privacy due to the pressure on the few facilities that exist, reduced recreational activities. You can see the photograph there is of prisoners who are preparing for a football match. If you look closely, the jerseys are written on Liverpool. So I think manager Douglas and also Arsene Wenger and the others in England would be surprised to know that we actually have their academies in Ugandan prisons. But also, if you look at the photo more keenly, you will see that some of those players maybe came from the society quite recently. Otherwise, if they had been in the prison for a long time, they would be more physically fit than that. And the point we are really trying to make is that both pretrial prisoners and convicts participate in programs in the prisons, in rehabilitative programs. In the earlier presentation we had from the UK, football being used as a rehabilitative program. But when you have pretrial prisoners also claiming a space, then it affects the overall objective of rehabilitating offenders. There is a heavy strain on health facilities, which already are inadequate. And above all, pretrial detainees compound the problem of the separation and segregation of offenders. Oftentimes you will find that pretrial and convicts are put in the same ward. You may not easily segregate age groups and so on. This technically also poses a serious challenge to social rehabilitation and eventual reintegration. Actually, some would argue that to mix the different categories of offenders, including pre-trial and post-trial, would lead to the prison becoming a school of crime. So the effect of overcrowding is really daunting, and it is down mainly to pre-trial detainees. The other indirect impact, which is more relevant to the theme of this conference this year, is the impact on rehabilitation and reintegration. And as I said earlier, the Uganda Prison Service has heralded a shift from penal to correctional services, and therefore is placing strategic attention on rehabilitation and reintegration. Yet, a large number of pretrial detainees put a strain on the facilities and limit the ability of the correctional services to devote attention to rehabilitation. We have some figures there on the rehabilitation programs that we undertake in Uganda Correctional Services. And as a consequence of these activities, we have witnessed a reduction in the rate of recidivism from 40% in 2005 to 27% last year, 2010. That is a tailoring workshop with an instructor training the inmates. I'd like to give some figures on formal education in Uganda's maximum security prison, where formal education is thriving. And I want to use this table to show that actually a significant number of pretrial detainees participate in formal education, which is a rehabilitative program. As you can see, up to 17% of those benefiting from formal education programs are pretrial. Those are inmates, ladies and men, sitting for a national examination in Uganda's maximum security prison. And it's interesting that they perform well, actually much better than some of the young men and women in the free schools. Finally, I would like to look briefly at a program that we run in the Uganda Prison Service, known as the From Prison Back Home Social Reintegration program. This program involves preparation for release during the last 6 months of one's time in prison. Some of the activities include interview of the offender through the prison's discharge board, visits to his or her family by prison social workers, preparation of the inmates through counseling and guidance and information giving, and then reconciliation initiatives, either with the community or with the victim of the offense, or with both, where necessary. And then ultimately post-release visits upon the release or discharge of the offender. In our experience, we realized that the involvement of the local community was very crucial in this project of social rehabilitation and reintegration. And the involvement of particularly social actors like paralegals, the communities, like the civic, local leaders, the religious leaders, the pastors, civil society and NGO leaders and operatives were very crucial for the eventual reintegration of the offenders of discharge. Looked at critically, social rehabilitation and integration then proceeds as one continuous process. If I may reflect on the statistics, in the last 5 years of implementing this program of social reintegration from prison back home, we have looked at the number of beneficiaries coming back, and it has been very negligible. The success rate is at 97% of all those who benefited from this program. All we are doing is to increase the coverage and intensity of the program to reach all that deserve. The limitation has always been on the resources available. Finally, a story of one of the there we are. One of the beneficiaries of the social rehabilitation and integration program of Uganda Prison Service is called Isaac. And Isaac wrote his letter. Isaac actually came to prison as a remand. He was in remand for about 4 years before he was convicted. And before his conviction, when he was committed to the High Court, we enrolled him to the formal education program. And so he went through the ordinary level, sat the ordinary level, national examination and passed, went on and sat the advanced level education exams and passed, and that coincided with the time of his release. The prison service made contacts with community actors, and we got an NGO that was willing to sponsor him through university. Being from a poor background, he could not afford. And when we got him an NGO, he had to register, and the university required that the applicant appears physically. So the prison service drove him to the campus. He registered and was admitted for a Bachelor of Social Science degree. On release, Isaac walks straight to university. And we expected him to give us returns that he's doing well in his social science degree. But when he came back to me, he said, "Sir, I didn't consult you, however, I changed to law." So I asked him, "Why did you change to a Bachelor of Laws?" And he said, "You see, the challenge we see while we are behind the walls is that there are very, very innocent young people who come to the prison. But because they don't have legal representation, they don't have any help, they languish for long on remand, and some end up being convicted because of lack of legal advice and representation." So he wants to make a contribution towards enhancing access to justice of those in conflict with the law. And we wished him well. He's now moving to his second year at the university. With that story of Isaac, and Isaac is not alone. We have about 20 young men who came from prison and are now in university, public universities and private universities outside. And several who are continuing with formal education outside, and several who have been able to get employment using the skills they acquired in the prisons. I take the honor to invite Elinor. Mrs. Elinor Wanyama Chemonges is the National Coordinator, Paralegal Advisory Services, Uganda. She's a scholar, having taught at McCourt University, and has been the main force of the Paralegal Advisory Services, causing great impact in the Uganda prison service and the criminal justice system.
Thank you very much, Robert, for the kind introduction. I would like to just explain a little bit about I work for the Paralegal Advisory Services, which is an initiative by a civil society organization. And I'll just give you a brief background as to how we got to start the Paralegal Advisory Services. One of the reasons that we have a huge remand population in prisons is that many people actually get into conflict with the law, and they do not know, they don't have any knowledge on the procedures of navigating through the justice system. They don't have any knowledge on the basics of law that they could use to demand for justice. And the other reason is that they lack somebody to create linkages, for example, with their communities, with their families, who could assist them to access justice, or even to create linkages within the criminal justice institutions, such as the police, the courts, the prisons, to help them navigate through and access justice faster. So one of the reasons, actually, why we have a huge pretrial remand population is because of that, some of the reasons I have given. So the Paralegal Advisory Services provides legal aid services which are aimed at improving access to justice by linking the demand and supply sides of the criminal justice system. The demand, looking at those people that are caught up in the criminal justice system and want to access justice, and the supply side, looking at the people that are administering justice. So when we talk about the paralegals, the Paralegal Advisory Services uses people who we call paralegals And briefly, these are individuals who possess the relevant skills and training to provide legal services applicable to the community that he or she is serving. The story of that my colleague just talked about is an indication that actually people in the criminal justice system lack that knowledge to be able to help themselves navigate through the system. So we have these paralegals whom we train on the basics of law, and we train them and place them in the criminal justice institutions to help the inmates to be able to, navigate through the system. They are based in communities. We also put them at the police stations at the entrance of the justice system. We also place them at the courts and in the prisons. And through that, they are able to closely work with the inmates to just create awareness and give them the knowledge that they can use to access justice. They also apply the knowledge that they have to be able to, give direction to the inmates. They are very creative because they deal with individuals at a personal level and use their knowledge creatively so that the person in the criminal justice system can be able to access the help that they need. They are also knowledgeable of the communities that they work in because they speak the local languages of the communities. And many of the people we find in our prisons are people that are not educated, and yet our official language and the language of court is English. So many times they don't understand what is going on in their individual cases. So these paralegals are able to explain to the inmates about what is happening in their cases, and they have been very helpful. The Paralegal Advisory Services was introduced in 2005, and we used the paralegals. We also used the social workers who are employed by the Uganda Prison Service under Mr. Omita's department. And so we employed them. We co-opted them on our program, and they work with the paralegals. They work in prisons, police, they work with the probation and the communities. What they do is that they target the pretrial prisoners, and they try to, hold the criminal justice system accountable to the standards that they have set down. For example, in our country, we have what we call the 48-hour rule, and this means that a suspect is not allowed to be kept in police custody for more than 48 hours. Within 48 hours after arrest, a suspect is supposed to be produced in court and charged. But as happens in many of our countries, many people are arrested before investigations are complete, and many times they find themselves staying beyond the 48 hours. So what the paralegals do is to actually sensitize the suspects and teach them that this is your right. You're not supposed to be held in detention for more than 48 hours. And if you are still in detention, then you have a right to apply for police bond. So the paralegals and the social workers will help the suspect to know their rights right at the entrance of the criminal justice system. And they also follow up cases throughout the system to ensure that the person's case is moving fast. And they also create linkages between suspects and their families, and where necessary, they also conduct mediation between the suspect and the complainant so as to reduce or stem the flow of cases into the formal justice system. And through their work, the paralegals and the social workers try to help to maintain family ties, which we know are very essential for reintegration. What happens in most of our prisons is that when an individual is arrested and detained in police custody or even sent to prison on remand, oftentimes the family do not even know where he is. The community do not know that this person is actually incarcerated. So the paralegals and the social workers try to create this link and try to get these people to visit their relatives in prison. And when we maintain that link between the inmate and his or her family, as well as the community, then the process of reintegration becomes a little, easier. And then the paralegals also have a program of tracing sureties to help facilitate pre-trial discharge. Oftentimes there are conditions set for one to be released at the pre-trial stage. You have to have surety to ensure that when you're required to report to court, you are available. And so through the tracing program, the inmate or the suspect is kept in touch with his or her community. Then we use these community ties to help victims and witnesses, and thus ensure faster administration of justice. I also want to mention that many times people do not access justice because once a case is reported and is in the system, the complainant, the victim, loses interest and doesn't ever step in court. And if they don't go to court, that means that the case cannot be concluded. So what happens is that the paralegals and the social workers help to trace these people and encourage them to report to court and give witness so that the case can be tried and concluded. If one is convicted, then they start serving the sentence. If there's no conviction, then perhaps one is released and the case sometimes dismissed. And then the work of the paralegals also provides links to the community service program, provides links to community service and rehabilitation programs. Sometimes the cases for which people are arrested are very trivial and minor, and right at the entrance of the criminal justice system at the police, the paralegals will sensitize the suspect that if they went through the trial, they could benefit from the community sentence, the community service sentence, which one serves while out of custody. So they serve the sentence from their homes. So because of this work that they do, we have had quite a number of people being convicted to community service as opposed to custodial sentences. And I'm glad to report that with us here we have our colleague from the community service program from Uganda. The head of the community service program is here with us, and we work with the community service program quite closely to ensure that people can be convicted to community service as opposed to the custodial sentences. Thank you. So paralegals perform critical functions at all stages of the criminal justice system. They provide invaluable outreach to communities and build trusted relationships within the criminal justice system as well as with the community. For example, in relation to the reintegration of remand prisoners whose cases might have been dismissed or were acquitted, paralegals help with reintegration and combating the social stigma, because oftentimes they will speak to the communities or the families of the inmates about, the circumstances of this person's incarceration and encourage them to be, to accept these people back into the communities. We've had quite a number of successes over the years. We've been running this program since 2005 as a pilot, and then it lasted 18 months, and from 2007 to 2010, we had funding to run the program for the 4 years. And as you can see, the figures are, they keep improving. For example, when we look at the number of sureties traced, these are family members or friends of incarcerated people. They have been increasing from 4,000, roughly 4,000 in 2007 to 53,000 in 2010. Then the number of people who were able to access police bond. That is, those are people who were released on pre-trial, because I say many times people are arrested before investigations are completed. So these people were able, you can see that the numbers are also increasing from about 1,000 to currently about 9,000, almost 10,000 people being, released on pre-trial. And the number of successful court bail applications has also increased to the numbers from about 700 to 4,000 plus. And then we talked about the community service orders that were granted as a result of interventions by paralegals. The number of community service orders is higher than this, but I just picked the figures that were helped by the paralegal advisory services. Currently, there are about 2,200 plus people that are serving community service sentences as a result of, help from the paralegal advisory services. Then we have quite a number of people that are being diverted that would have otherwise found themselves in prisons, but were diverted through mediation and alternative dispute resolution. If you look at a figure of up to 1,300 people that have been diverted, we are, to an extent, helping to, cut down on the congestion levels and, try to get people agree and sort their cases out of the criminal justice system. So that is one of the success programs in Uganda that has been responsible for reducing the remand population from 63% of the entire prison population to currently 54. And we hope that as we continue to work and reach most of the prisons and most of the police stations, the number of remand population will decrease. I'd like to invite Kerstin to just give us examples from other African countries where this program has been very successful.
Thank you. I'm not going to take very much time because I think we want to leave some time for discussion and questions. But we're very enthusiastic to be working with programs such as the one we've just heard about in Uganda. And I think it's testament to the strong partnership that's built, and also the vision that the organizations in Uganda have had. So this is not an isolated case in Uganda, and in fact, a lot of these programs started from a program in Malawi that started about 10 years ago, which was based on a model of community-based and prison-based paralegals providing access to legal aid in the prisons. And actually, some of the colleagues from the Malawi program went to Uganda and shared their experiences there. And I think what's very interesting is that when Uganda took up the program, they adapted it and changed it to suit the exact situation in Uganda. And so, for example, the innovation to include the social workers in the program was not something that was part of the program in Malawi. So it's enthusiasing to see that we have programs across different countries, but that are all tailored and adapted to the particular situations. So currently in Africa there are similar programs in Kenya, in Zambia, in Sierra Leone, in Nigeria, working with duty solicitors and volunteers linked to the Legal Aid Council, in Ghana and in Bangladesh in Asia. And these are just some of the pictures from the programs in other countries. That's in Sierra Leone, and the paralegals on their motorcycle in Sierra Leone. And just to give one other example, we're also working in Mexico with the state government of Morelos and a number of NGOs, Mexican NGOs based both at the national level and at the state level. And this is a slightly different project, but essentially getting at the same aims. There have been massive reforms of criminal justice systems in Latin America over the last years. And as we see in other regions, the pretrial problem was also significant. And so this project in Morelos is a pilot project to bring the practices in the state in line with the new Criminal Procedure Code. So the system seeks to balance the presumption of innocence with the state's duty to maintain public safety, as well as the integrity of the criminal justice system as a whole. And so this system is known as a pretrial services model and is a two-part process. The first part involving an evaluation that takes place between the arrest and the first hearing. The team evaluate the risk that the suspect poses to the community, the likelihood that he or she will abscond, their history in terms of previous offences, and the community ties, as well as other things. And this information is verified, compiled into a report, and sent to the prosecutor and the defence lawyer. And so that's the first part of the process, and then the second part is a supervision element, working with NGOs, community groups, schools, churches, to provide supervision to those that are released pre-trial, and to make sure that they then turn up to court on the prescribed days. And at the moment in Mexico, it's a pilot program with juveniles, but the idea is that it'll be expanded to the adults population and also to other states in Mexico. And what's also quite exciting in Latin America at the moment is that Peru and other countries in the region are also looking to see how to develop similar models. So that's another example, but essentially focused on the same entry point to the criminal justice system, looking at an evaluative and supervisory model, whereas we have in the program we heard about in Uganda, a legal aid program run by paralegals but supported as well by lawyers. So just to end, what we're doing is working on a global campaign for pretrial justice, and it has different components to research and document the scale and the consequences of the problem, to pilot practices in different countries, build a forum of knowledge sharing and information across communities, across regions, and very importantly to try and foster sustained investment by governments and by donors where donors are involved in the countries. So we're very keen to discuss and exchange with as many countries and organizations as possible to see ways in which we can work together, ways in which we can strengthen these communities of practice. At the moment we have a number of kind of online newsletters that people can sign up to. We're engaging in joint advocacy, joint research, and so we're very keen to exchange and discuss possibilities. And we also have a number of publications, a lot of which the presentation was drawn from on the socioeconomic impact of pretrial detention and torture and pretrial detention. So thank you very much for listening and coming to the session, and we're looking forward to further exchange.
Well, this has been very, very informative. I could not help but sit here and think about my own country, the United States. We have 2 million people incarcerated in our country, of which 1.2 million are remand or pretrial prisoners. If we accomplished what Elinor and Robert have talked about in our country, that would be 200,000 less people in our prison system today. By being able to accomplish what they have done in Uganda in their pretrial unlocking of that second prison. Very, very helpful. We would now like to invite any comments, questions from our audience this afternoon, so I open the floor, please. The microphones are along the way here, so if you don't mind, I use those.
Hi, my name is Rob Allen from the UK. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was great to hear such successful and practical initiatives going on. I wanted to go back to a slide, firstly, you showed, which was the percentage of people in pretrial detention charged with petty or minor crimes, and these were very high rates. And I suppose the question I was asking is, why are these very minor cases coming into the system in this way? In whose interest is it? We heard all about the disadvantages for the prison system of having these very minor cases that you have to pay for and clothe and feed. Why in a low-income country? Who is the force behind doing it? Are the police under pressure to put people in custody? Are the prosecutors under pressure? Are there some of them actually who might be very persistent offenders? If they were released, might they be in danger of retribution from the community, who would take the law into their own hands? I just wonder why you think there are so many small cases that are going this deep into the system, because I don't think that would happen in many Western countries these days. They would be kind of diverted away if that slide is based on accurate information. Thanks.
I think the question was directed towards you, Kerstin. So if you would start with that, and other panel members can join.
I think there are a number of different reasons. And some of the reasons, I think, go back to one of the slides that I had on some of the drivers for arbitrary arrest and arbitrary detention. That the police don't have the resources to kind of arrest the people that they need to arrest, and so it's easier to kind of meet their targets by arresting easy targets, if you like. I think that corruption plays a major role, unfortunately, in a lot of countries. As part of this series of reports that we're doing, we have a paper coming out later this year on corruption that tries to unpack some of these, some of the points at the pretrial phase where corruption is rampant. And one of the cases that we documented in Bangladesh found that there were about 23 bribes were paid by a family whose family member was in detention. So I think there are a whole load of different reasons. There are also a lot of people in the criminal justice system who are essentially there for civil cases. In Sierra Leone, one of the very common crimes that you see in the logbook of the police and the prison service is fraudulent conversion, which is, I mean, it dates back from the Criminal Procedure Code from 1901 or something like that, when Sierra Leone was under British administration. And this is a law that's been changed numerous times in the UK, and yet in Sierra Leone it's still sitting there on the statute books. And so people who lent small sums of money to each other can't pay it back, and they're ending up in the criminal justice system. So often it's not even crimes, it's civil cases that are finding their way. And essentially the criminal justice system is just becoming somehow a dumping ground for a lot of other problems. And obviously we need to tackle the problems at the different stages. We need to work with the police, and we're working at the moment with an organisation called Okoth, which is an association of policing organisations in Africa, to try and actually look at some of these drivers of arbitrary pretrial arrest and detention. But I think programs like the paralegal program, I mean, they provide an independent person within the prisons and the police stations. So just having somebody there asking questions, asking, you know, does this person have a case file? has this person been presented, is the case coming up before court, actually has quite a significant impact on the case flow and on whether people are in detention or not. But I mean, I agree that it's a major issue having these number of minor crimes in the system.
I'll be very brief. I think that in our case in Uganda, many of these minor cases get into the prisons or get incarcerated mainly because of lack of alternatives. You can see that from the time that the Paralegal Advisory Services began in 2005, the numbers have been increasing because we have created awareness on the alternatives available. For example, the community service program, we said you can be sentenced to community service, so those are out. And then there are also alternatives such as mediation and alternative dispute resolution that we have begun to put at the entrance of the justice system. Where these programs were not, that is why such cases ended up. But also looking at the other side of the coin, we could say that we get many of these minor cases ending up in prison because maybe the communities are gaining faith in the formal justice system, that they believe that the justice system is becoming efficient, and if they report even the minor cases, then they get justice. Alternatively, it could be maybe a failure of the informal systems, justice systems, where, for example, the families or the religious institutions or traditional justice systems are not working, then they resort to the formal justice system. Those are just some of the practical explanations.
Thank you. There was another. Yes, thank you.
I just want to answer. Robert raised the question when he was beginning that how do we participate correctional staff? And apparently he gave nice figures for a country, but he did not bring out the issues which are being done. One, there has been a great improvement in the filing system in the prison service. That means that the cases presented, issues of files are missing, are less. That contributes the less figures for pre-trial. That's where we can participate. Then two is the networking. In Uganda, we have what we call the jails, justice, law, and order sector. There, issues are raised that maybe a particular court, there's a challenge, and then it's addressed at that level. Then three, which has been done, prison service. I'm not part of prisons, but I'm on the community service, but we network and I know what's happening. They have been doing counseling, and when they do counseling, you find a person who have kept on denying, either he pleads guilty and the person is convicted. Then you see that the numbers are coming down. And also to accept to work with the paralegal. It's an NGO. You have government, private partnership, just to see that there is an improvement in justice. That was my contribution. I introduced myself. I'm Paul Chintu, Commissioner Community Service. Thank you.
Probably just a further clarification on that. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Paul, for the additional information. And I think he has brought one new dimension which we did not dwell on so much, and that is the coordination between all the agencies. And actually, the other day we were saying the Paralegal Advisory Services offers a human chain link, because they move from the police to the prosecution to the judiciary up to the prison and back to the police through the community. So they link the system in a very active and proactive way. But the coordination between the justice agencies has made a big contribution to the reduction of the pre-trial population in Uganda. And I think it has also given a number of answers to what Alan asked. because their coordination revealed some very interesting facts. For example, that the operatives in the different agencies had a resistance to practice change. So, for example, a new law comes in, and you will find that the members in the judiciary are not even interested in knowing, leave alone using it. One time there was a constitutional review, and they said, okay, the maximum period of time somebody can spend in prison on remand if he's charged with a minor offense is 2 months. And previously there was no limit. But the judiciary was operated business as usual, as if there was no change. And it had to take the intervention of the paralegal advisory services and prisons. That's why we are saying that prisons need to be proactive. You cannot act as recipients. So we literally moved to the members of the judiciary and said, but ladies and gentlemen, learned friends, this is what the law is saying now. And many of them were pleasantly surprised. Many of them took time to change. They didn't say, well, that is there, but we shall see how it progresses. But with the follow-up of prisons and the paralegal advisory services, they had to put it into practice, and it helped a lot in the congestion. The same to community service. Paul will agree with me that for a long time, community service was not being actively used. We have those figures, as Kerstin put, on minor offenses. Majority of them qualify for community service orders. But somehow there is what we call in Uganda a culture of imprisonment. Everyone believes any offender must go to the prison. Even the politicians, you will hear them making their remarks. You destabilize the peace, we shall take you to Luzira. Luzira is the maximum security prison. So that is all they know. An offender ends up in prison. So I think these are things which need to be tackled in these various stages.
Well spoken. There was another question. Yes. It's turned on. I'll think for it. Yeah, you're good.
Thank you. My name is
Come closer to the microphone.
My name is Dupe Atoki. I'm the African Union Special Rapporteur on Prisons and Prison Detention in Africa. I want to commend speakers, particularly Kerstin, who has given us a global view, and both Elinor and Robert on Uganda precisely. My mandate has taken me across all regions of Africa in prison visits. And so I want to just make a global presentation on the impact of pretrial detention in Africa, and highlighting the issues that we have raised, but throwing up the major impact of pretrial detention.
I just urge you that we have 5 minutes remaining, so.
Yes. And to say that in Africa, you had mentioned, Stephen had mentioned that in the United States you have about 1.2 million pretrial detainees. Now, the difference is that you could have pretrial detainees ranging from 2 to 3 or 4 weeks or 1 month, but you could also have pretrial detainees of up to 10 years. And so the difference in their social reintegration is very clear depending on the number of years that they have spent behind bars. One who has been detained and has been in trial detention for 10 years has a bigger challenge to reintegrate into society and to try to unlock the second prison than one who has been detained for 2 weeks and is tried and released. So I think for major countries in Africa, the statistics are two-pronged. The number of persons in the trial and the length of stay in the trial, in prison detention. These two details impact in diverse measures on social reintegration. While some countries have large numbers of pretrial detention, most countries in Africa have both large numbers and long stay of pretrial detention, and I thought that that is a critical point that we should not miss out in looking at the effect of reintegration into the society that pretrial detention may have.
Thank you for that. Next question here, and two more there. We'll try to make these quick. You're fine. Okay. Yes, sir. I'm just trying to get you to the flyer on time.
Thank you. Mine is just to add to what has been said, to share with you some experience that we have in Kenya Probation Service. I work in Kenya Probation Service. We realized that there are several cases of those under pretrial that actually have been given bail conditions, but they are unable to afford because they are maybe irrelevant or not inappropriate. So we have, as Probation Service, started a program called Prevail and Bail Information System. So far we are processing a lot of cases, we are writing reports, taking to court, and the courts are reconsidering either as initial or as revision of the condition which was already given. Secondly, we have victims of offences, a bill that has been developed on realization that, again, like they said, in terms of reconciliation, we need to identify some of these victims, and if they are reconciled at early stage, then we'll be diverting some of the cases like already mentioned. Thirdly, there's the issue of using a High Court judge to go around prisons, and in that effort we have realized there are so many cases of those who are languishing in prison, in remand prisons, that would ordinarily not be there. So their cases are also reviewed instantly. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Last one here, and then Uju, you get the last comment.
Thank you. I just want to appreciate the presentation. My name is Sarah Pretrial from the Nigerian prisons. I appreciate the presentation on legal services in Uganda. And I have two questions to ask. The first is, who pays them? Second is, if they, like you say, they want to expand them to cover the entire Ugandan criminal justice system, who will foot the bill? And finally, I want to give this comment. One of the things that have come frequently in exchange of ideas among prison and correction officers, especially with reference to this whole thing, pretrial detainees, is how to get somebody home. How do we get the person home? How many people are released? But I want us to bear in mind that the essence of the criminal justice mechanism is to get those who are suspected, determine the probability of those who are guilty, and pass them to the institution. And those who are innocent should be sent as quickly as possible. When we come around to saying we want to release this person without actually finding out who we are releasing, whether there's potentiality for guiltiness, or whether there's some innocent that have been even traumatized by long stay, I want us to know that at the end of the day, the state, each nation, owes the responsibility to citizens to provide justice that is fair and fast.
Okay. Each of the last three interveners have brought up very, very good points that are worthy of much more discussion. There will be an opportunity for that. Uju is going to mention again what I said at the outset about the opportunity on Thursday, I think, for the African delegates to come together. Did you want to give any more specifics of that, Uju? She always has the last word, and I bore you.
I don't know about that, Steve. Thank you very much. First, I want to say that this is a very important platform, and I do want to thank the Society Justice Initiative and and the team from Uganda for what they have shared with us. But it's also for us to understand that challenges and the solutions and intervention differ from the different regions and the nature of the countries. For example, the countries that are in fragile economies or resource constrained and post-conflict situations have their own peculiar such challenges, but also to use this opportunity to encourage us, the people who are here first, to say that Open Society Justice Initiative would love to have more intense partnership and collaboration with the various jurisdictions that you have present from the various African countries, and there are many of that. But because of time, maybe we will look at ways of discussing in concrete terms what those interventions and partnership would actually bring to bear. And secondly, to say that on the 15th, which is Thursday, from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. at Enterprise, we are inviting everyone who is interested in prison reform intervention in Africa and supporting African jurisdictions with practical interventions and support to be with us at a strategic meeting to look at updating specific countries, but also to look at opportunities, because it is until we take these things out in the field and test them and partner that we will gain more from coming together. That session will be chaired by the Special Rapporteur on Prisons and Conditions of Detention in Africa, who also is the chair for the African Union on Torture Prevention, Commissioner Tubatobi. And I think it would be a very wonderful opportunity to have interface between the public, which is the government, the voluntary sector, and of course, the private sector. Please remember to be there. It's 15th, 11 a.m. Thank you very much, Steve, for this.
Thank you, Raju. It's an excellent example of what ICPA stands for, what we try to promote, and these kind of dialogues between various countries that have various ideas that I think should be heard. One last, just an announcement. The first bus will leave tonight for our gala reception, the host country. It will leave from the 4th floor here. The bus won't leave from the 4th floor, but we will gather on the 4th floor here. The first one at 5:30. The last one will be at 6. Please don't miss the last one, or you'll be on your own. I want you to join me in thanking this incredible panel for their passion this afternoon.
Shop one has ended over.
Yeah.